Welcome to the We Inspire Futures podcasting project. Listen as Mark Melnick, a teacher from Markham, Ontario, describes how to achieve engagement in the high school classroom.
I think we came from a generation where, education was still very much teacher-centered and where there was a lot of sort of memorize and regurgitate. And, I think I often felt that I was sort of one of those disengaged learners who wasn't really invested in my secondary education for sure. And so much of that changed when, I went to university and had those smaller classes where it's almost entirely student-centered and seminar-based and, discussion-based. And you realize that learning is so much more. And, also taking subjects that I was really passionate about, that changed things too. We sort of, our curriculum demands that, students take certain courses, whether they like it or not, and which, is good for encouraging variety. But right from day one, I think, and I don't know if it's sort of from a lot of my background in coaching and in sports, but so much of it has been about putting students at the forefront. And, I think further to that is having a lot of activities that are meaningful. I really, how many busy work assignments did we do in school? And if I ever feel that something is busy work, I take it out. And just that whole idea of, trying to get, I think a lot of the stuff that we've done with technology has been trying to get to that sort of magic 90+% engagement in the classroom. You have these, the statistic, you have the students, the teacher-centered classrooms, and you might have 60% of the students engaged, and, how much are they actually processing or doing with that? So, a lot of my philosophy in terms of student-centered and collaborative and constructive learning and all that, comes from research, but also comes from experiences. And just, I find if my students are excited, I'm excited, and then we're all excited together. And it's you want to wake up every morning and you can't wait to get out the door to sort of do the next thing and, look at the clock and like, how did 75 minutes disappear like that? And have kids say, oh, I wish this was 2 periods kind of thing. And there's so many positive things that come out of it. To me, it's all there. You're creating an environment. So I spend a lot of time and energy around environment.
If it's student-centered, I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about your assessment.
It all comes from design. And, I've sort of been talking a lot to people in the last 3 years for some reason, just specifically about design. I think it's because, I think you're doing a good job if it looks easy in the classroom. And I think, when it does look easy, it's an appreciation of the fact that you may have done 20 hours of work leading up to that 75-minute lesson or that. And, I think one of the best examples of that is simulation-based learning, where, in my grade 12 politics class, I'd sort of, being a political science major, that was something that I really had a passion for. And, there's a few ways you can approach it. You could have lecture after lecture every day. You could have textbook and, read and answer questions. There's some of those more traditional ways that you could approach it. Or you could, make the kids emotionally feel the learning and become emotionally invested in their learning. And that's where, in some of the simulations I do in that class in particular, there's months of preparation that goes into putting, a 2-week seminar together or 2-week simulation together. But to have kids, regardless of what the tool is, a couple years ago it was online forums and stuff like that. And this year we integrated Twitter into one of our simulations. And to see kids just constantly, online all day, engaging with the topic and, ultimately getting to they get so much deeper. So I guess to answer your question in terms of how do you assess these things, it's all about design. You have to have, starting with, they have to have knowledge. So whether that comes from, differentiated instruction, right? Having a bit of lecture, a bit of media, a bit of, we do use concept maps a lot. So concept mapping out ideas And then, using that as a starting point, and obviously, so much of what we do focuses on skills. So research skills, and, also I think a big focus is skills with technology. I mean, if things are so fresh all the time now and things are changing and we have to be so flexible. So yeah, I mean, you have to be so dynamic and flexible all the time because things are changing. And if you want to effectively evaluate how the kids are learning and what they're learning, I mean, you can still modify and use traditional practices, but is it all about what a student can sort of push back on a multiple choice test, or is it what they can show you on a daily basis or what they could put together in maybe a much more critical position paper or something that is much richer and deeper than just I guess a lame test. I don't know how else to really say it.
How did they use Twitter for that kind of digging deeper?
I know Twitter's been around for a while, and you sort of see the progression of it in education and how there's obviously challenges and problems, and that immediate sort of limited character, lack of reflection that Twitter creates challenges. But I guess getting why we used it and how I thought it was used effectively was, the students that were in the simulation said it'd be really cool if we could, sort of engage in the online environment in a way that's way more effective than online chats or forums or using Moodle or these sort of education-based things that kids don't really relate to, whereas Twitter, they're all on it all the time, and it's also something that's accessible constantly on whatever device they have on their phones and things like that. So basically, we help kids set it up, and from there, when they set it up, it was fantastic because it's an international relations simulation focused on the Middle East, and pairs of students would represent countries, and basically what they were doing is engaging in debate and discussion. And the big thing that I focused on is having they had to use academic resources within their posts. So, you'd have them citing foreign policy, foreign affairs, the Atlantic Monthly, and, CNN, whatever media network that they could, focusing on all that stuff constantly. And it brought an academic slant to it. And I would never argue that it was perfect, because part of the debate between Israelis and Palestinians, for example, is be very heated and you want them to sort of take on the role of their country and to be very biased, because I think it makes it so much more real for them. And I've had Jewish students and Palestinian students in my classes, and I think all the students learn so much more when they appreciate how deep the anger is or how deep the resentments are, and again, moderating and keeping track of all that. I mean, the beauty of Twitter for me, but I was getting all their tweets as well, and I could monitor how long they were going and how far they were going, and I could pop in if I saw something that was inappropriate. I could pop in and say, look, let's make sure we're keeping this academic. And so it was an interesting experiment. I would definitely use it again, because of, I think the one thing that I found weird was it did give the voice to certain students that you may not hear from a lot in class, who might be kind of shy. There were a couple kids that I was worried about them because they were tweeting all day long. So I knew they were in other classes and they were making posts, which I was kind of like, for the other teachers, I felt bad, but for me, it was ridiculous to see how ridiculously engaged they were. And I mean, you'd be seeing posts at 12, 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, and stuff like that. And then right away, at 6 in the morning, they'd all be responding to each other and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, take the learning inside the classroom, brought that to a whole other level.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the We Inspire Futures podcasting project with Mark Melnick. Below, you'll find the information needed to contact Mark and to learn more about his exciting classroom practice.